That's just the last 2.5 years at INFORUM. The next time we make this video, you're gonna see Tavi and you're gonna see a whole lot more of Daniel Handler because we get him up on this stage as often as possible. So before we get started, I'm seeing some people come in late, and one of the advantages of seeing all of these speakers and hearing their stories is it's in a room this big and this accessible with our speakers if it's not at the Castro Theater. You're gonna meet Tavi during the book signing afterwards, so if you don't already have her book, you're going to be able to purchase it afterwards and get it signed. You'll be able to get your pictures taken. But as people are coming in, if they're looking for these seats over here, go ahead and be friendly, be a community, help them squish on down and find the seats next to you. During the last 15 minutes of the program, you're going to be able to ask your questions live. A microphone's going to pop up in the middle of the aisle. Daniel will invite you to come up and ask your questions, make your questions questions, make them short, and make them questions. I'll also help make sure that the microphone hits you and gets to the right level. But that's about it. We're gonna get this show on the road. In order to do that, please help me welcome to the stage the inimitable musician, author, Lemony Snicket, and sometimes our on-stage bartender, Daniel Handler.
Hi. Where is the future? Where do the best ideas come from? As far as I can tell, the answer a lot of the time is young women. A heap of expectations and assumptions are foisted upon them, and those who step around the landmines and stay loose and stay quick and evade capture burst forth in ways we cannot help but breathlessly admire. Tavi Gevinson is totally this. She's on screen and on stage, and for years we've seen her snapshotted with anyone and everyone involved in fashion, her first avid enthusiasm. And the center of her keen and insightful, observant, imaginative brain and heart is Rookie, a website, and now 3 anthologies. The articles and the lists and the spreads and the manifestos and the memoirs, it's all a fierce and dazzling thing. It's a wonderland and a conference table. It's a coffee house and a rec room and a map of the world for young women and for anyone who respects them and is curious about what they're up to. Everyone loves it, and while some of us of an older generation may find its roots in, say, Sassy Magazine, back when Sassy Magazine was Sassy Magazine, Tavi Gevinson and Rookie are all their own. And here she is, and here they are. Applaud for her now. Well, hi. We'll plug you in too. Hello there.
Hi.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me and for coming.
Sure. I'm interested in, I want to start with how you started in fashion, because I think that's when most people heard of you, and I think that's when most people thought, how in the world is this person so young, so deep, and so knowledgeable in the world of fashion? And when did that first kind of kick you in the head?
So when I was in elementary school, my sisters and I all did plays, and I was very obsessed with musicals, and one of my best friends from a local theater where I did a kids program, her older sister had a fashion blog, and I think I saw some kind of connection between I'd never been interested in fashion or the industry, but there was some kind of correlation between seeing her in these really cool outfits, and they were so different every day, and then what I liked so much about plays and acting and stuff like that. And she was in high school, and I just thought she was really cool. When you're, I don't know, in 6th grade, and a girl, any 15-year-old girl is amazing. So I just I don't know, pressured her into showing me the stuff she liked, and she sent me, links to other blogs. And this was before blogging was really a profession. And the ones I started reading were just other young women who were really more chronicling their personal style, but then I would, go to like the bookstore after school and get a nice like $20 international magazine and read an interview with a designer I was just learning about, and then also just the archive online of like being able to look at everything. I just like ate it all up.
And was finding a community like that online for you, was that more powerful than your social kind of real life community, or were they different? Were they the same?
It's weird because when I look at my life now, like most of my friends are, and the people I see every day are people that I know somehow through work, which started with like meeting people online and stuff like that. I still liked, being able to like have sleepovers with other middle schoolers, but there was definitely, I just felt like I was alienating or annoying if I would be like, you guys, let's talk about Japanese design. No one likes that.
And so previously theater was a community for you in middle school?
Yeah, elementary school, middle school, in the beginning of high school until I started rookie, and then everything was focused on that.
And so talk a little bit I think for most of us, it's unimaginable to think about what started happening to you in middle school and in high school in terms of your own profile and what you were doing. And I'm curious what your friends in school and what people in school thought about.
I felt very embarrassed when someone at school would be like, my mom showed me an article about you. And I was glad that it was kind of like these, obscure fashion magazines were so separate from whatever people in Oak Park, Illinois were actually looking at every day. I felt like I was, that profile existed in a very specific community. But as people did kind of find out, I think it was embarrassing because there is something that I feel sheepish about in like sharing your life online. Or like being public at all or wanting an audience at all. I don't think those are bad qualities, and I think you have to do it if you want to write or make art or whatever. But something felt so hammy about it, so I guess as people kind of found out, I would just like deflect it or deny it or something, which is insane. Like the evidence was all there, but
yeah, I think if you denied it, I can't imagine anyone would believe you. But
I'm like, it's another Tavi. That really common name.
It's a weird Photoshop session that a Japanese design magazine has. I can understand that.
Right.
Yeah. And then how did you build the community of people who helped you with Rookie? Where did that come from?
So then towards the end of middle school, I found Sassy Magazine. Because I followed blogs of some women who were not teenagers. And I remember first learning about it because some of them had written about it. And then I think I wrote some post kind of trying to piece together what I knew about it and how it felt so different from the offerings that I saw in magazines for people my age, as I was kind of getting ready to embark on adolescence. And I did a trade with a girl who read my blog. She sent me 12 issues of Sassy, and I sent her a mixtape. And then...
That seems fair.
Yeah, I really hope she wasn't disappointed.
Well, what was on the mixtape?
I don't remember. I'm sure it was just because this was a time when I was finding out about Sassy and Riot Girl and other movements of that time. I think it was probably a lot of Riot Girl music. And then, and then I kind of started planting seeds. I had made zines, or I had tried to pull together other bloggers I liked for kind of small projects. But then I wrote a post on my blog saying that I wanted to start something, an online magazine for teenage girls, and asked people to send in their work, and got 3,000 emails, and then went through them over the course of my freshman year, because it was a really big project, and then but the actual team of editors is really small, but there are 100 contributors.
Because I think one thing that really comes through on the site, and certainly in the yearbooks, is there's a real sense of community there. You really have a sense of everyone hanging out and talking about this stuff. And I'm wondering if that's how it feels like to you, or does that feel like something that you're consciously trying to create, or how does that go?
I've always been really glad that it's organic. And I also want to make sure it never feels like there's a community and everyone's hanging out, but the reader isn't part of it. It's kind of interesting walking this line where, like, I want the tone to be really, to feel really natural and casual and informal and accessible. And it's also wonderful that we have all these writers that really balance each other out. That wasn't intentional. I think we just found really good people and they liked working together. But I also, like, I remember reading about Sassy and then also reading some of the criticisms and kind of trying to keep in mind what I would want to be different now. And I mean, there are also so many things where, like, things have just changed. Like, for example, when Sassy started, it was really uncommon for a publication to be that snarky about celebrities. So it was kind of, it was like, excuse me, but it was sassy of them to do that.
Right.
It was subversive. And now that, like, we live in a celebrity culture and there's so much snark and gossip, I don't think it would be that interesting if we had more of that tone. So my point is just that there were certain things with Sassy, like it sometimes feeling like too much of a clubhouse.
Right.
It's just interesting walking the line between, like, community and clubhouse.
And do you feel like there are people who aren't part of the club or feel like they're not part of the club, or do you is that a sense of criticism that you get?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's, like, extremely prevalent. Is that the right word? What does that mean?
Prevalent means you see it all over the place.
Great. I'm so relieved.
Yeah, I think no one even knew you were unsure about that.
Great. No, it's not like, it's nothing like an uproar, but I read the comments and then I try to keep an eye out for language that gets maybe too insular or something. Because there's also something that happens with, like, you know, New York is the easiest place to work in publishing and media, kind of. And I also don't want to create something that makes it feel like New York is the center of the world, and if you're still in high school somewhere, you're, like, not a part of it.
Right.
So those are all things that I'm just trying to be conscious of. And
talk a little bit more about Sassy Magazine, because it's that was really important to me when I was growing up, and I think I'm older than you. And so I'm curious exactly how that fell into your lap and what that felt like.
Well, once I found it, I think I just found it really refreshing. I mean, a lot of the references were obviously outdated for me, but a lot of them were also things that I just liked anyways.
Right.
And there's also something about, like, I don't know, Winona Ryder and Johnny Depp. Like, no one's matched that level of cool. But, like, 90s nostalgia aside, I gave a talk then when I was 14 at Idea City in Toronto, and I talked about, like, what we could learn from this magazine that folded in the 90s and what it would look like today. And it was mostly that, like, you know, fashion in Sassy was fun. It wasn't like a source of anxiety or oppression.
Right.
But I'm curious, like, how did you find it and why did you connect with it?
Well, I think I grew up here, which is obviously a big cultural and cosmopolitan city. But one of the things I'm curious about is that I grew up in pre-web culture. And so things like Sassy Magazine, you would read about a band and you'd never heard of them before. Mm-hmm. And you couldn't immediately go and look up 10,000 things about it. You had to go to a record store and hope it was there. And you had to stare at the cover long enough that you had to hope it would be interesting. You couldn't have heard it before. You know, you just had to finally decide to spend your allowance on it, and then you would take it home, and sometimes it would be terrible. And that whole experience is not how anybody listens to music now. I mean, you know, there's nothing. If you hear about a band, you can hear it. You know, by the time people are done saying what they sound like, you can have it on your device listening to it.
Right.
And so, I think for a certain slice of the population, it was a kind of cultural underground. And I'm curious always for a generation that has no memory of that, what that is shaped like.
Right. We have the super high-tech thing where you go into a defunct Borders and there's like a CD and you like choose the track and listen to it.
Yeah, that was as terrible as you got, I guess. Yeah. And I think also for feminism, which is obviously something that I want to hear from you about, but I think that it was the first feminist thing for me that was like fun and cool.
Right.
And wasn't in a way that felt alienating for like a 14-year-old boy.
Right. I mean, that's the other thing is I liked how Sassy could, they would remove stigma around the word feminist by kind of using it casually and like something that's just kind of a set of beliefs that's a part of your life. And with Rookie, I mean, I don't identify it as a feminist website because feminist websites tend to be about the movement and more focused. But I'm a feminist and see the world through a lens where I just want equality for everyone, and I think a lot of our writers, whether they identify as a feminist or not, feel the same way. And I just kind of hope that comes out naturally. And then,
was feminism a part of your childhood and your upbringing?
I mean,
I know your parents are here, so we can get them to leave if you want to talk about.
They were crazy misogynists. No, I mean, not. I don't remember really hearing the word that much, but I think I was raised in an environment where I was really encouraged and supported, and I think when I came to it, Sassy was I think maybe I did initially have the idea of the stereotype, like hairy legs and man-hating and whatever. And Sassy was one of the things that kind of debunked the myth for me.
And clearly you've had very supportive parents, but I'm curious when you say something like, when I was 14, I went and delivered a talk in Toronto, I think there's very few people in the audience who can relate directly to that experience. And I'm wondering when did they ever say to you, no, this is too crazy? Or was this always something that they nurtured in you? Or when, a lot of people would say, I wouldn't let my 14-year-old daughter go and speak in Toronto, I think.
Well, it was such a slow burn. I'm sure it doesn't seem that way, but it felt that way. I was still going to school every day. I would have these like occasional experiences where I would go out of town and do something like that or go to Fashion Week. That I think it was just really kind of step by step, case by case. You know, we would, it's so weird, they're right here. But we would figure out like what seemed right for me. And but I also usually knew like I don't want to, like, a random email about a weird ad campaign. Like, I would know, I just really trusted my instinct on doing stuff that felt creative or like I would learn something. And they were really supportive and never pushy.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned Fashion Week. But talk a little bit about how it seems to you that fashion is central to a bunch of cultural things you're interested in. Mm-hmm. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, I think it was my introduction to so many other things I became interested in because when I was obsessed with a collection, I would find out what inspired it, and the designers I like, it would be a movie or an album or something like that, so it felt very connected to other things, and I think that was why before I started Rookie, my blog did become more about just the movies I'd watched lately and paying attention to the costumes in that. And I mean, even now, like I don't keep up with fashion anymore. But I feel like when I do look at it, the stuff I'm most drawn to feels like connected to other art forms in some way.
And do you feel like it's driven by nostalgia? So many of your touchstone movies and other kind of cultural things that you talk about on Rookie are from the past. I mean, are things that either you were very young for or not around for. And do you feel like our best glamorous days are behind us, or do you think, or is that just more where your look is, or do you feel that it's still present?
No, I think the format of Rookie is that every month is a different theme, and then we explore that theme. And so then we'll have a list of movies related to that theme. And I just don't want all of them to be whatever just came out.
Right.
And I also think that there is such an amazing archive of everything online, and the idea of kind of curating it in some way is exciting to me. And I also think that it's really useful to know, if you're a creative person, to know about the context you are putting your work in. Like, you have to learn the rules before you can break them.
Right.
But that's not because I'm like trying to educate young people about like ELO or something. Like, I don't care. I think I guess I don't know. Those are just like, I just never felt limited to what's around today, and I'm really optimistic about what's around today. And I think one really amazing thing about being alive now and running Rookie now is that with Sassy, it was how you would find out about more obscure bands. And I think when I started Rookie, because I was really into Riot Girl and I was really angsty, I was very obsessed with this John Waters interview where he was like, there used to be beatniks and then hippies and then punks and now there's nothing, go find it. And I was like, yeah. But then I kind of realized countercultures come out of people not identifying with the mainstream culture. And I was like, well, what if we change the mainstream culture? And so with Rookie, I don't just want it to be a place where you find out about an obscure band, but also where you get like the most in-depth interview with Lorde, who is like a huge pop star. And I think that also today, so many of those lines are just blurred, like alternative and indie, or alternative and mainstream.
Right.
Because everyone kind of finds out about the same stuff. Like maybe during the time of Sassy, it would have meant something to like go to school and meet someone who knows about the same bands that you do.
It did.
But now I just don't think it's the same. And that's really exciting to me because I think that's a really silly binary.
Yeah, well, high school's silly. Talk a little bit about this curation that you do. Is when you're putting movies in a list and when you're applying a soundtrack to different themes, how much of that is you and how much of it is other people? And are you always trusting this instinct of yours, or are other people kind of advising you that this is actually a good thing, even if it's not personally to your taste?
In the beginning, I was super micromanaging because I had to be really clear about what I wanted it to be and establishing the tone. And I also just had tons of ideas for each theme. Now I see myself more as kind of creating the space for other people to come in with their stuff, and I trust them, and I'm still overseeing it. But I don't personally have the same like desire to make playlists that I did sophomore year or whatever.
Right. Do you think you're getting jaded about it, or do you think?
No, I just think that's not my feeling with Rookie now is when I started it, I could write more directly about what was happening in my life because I was in high school. And now, even though I've only been out of high school a year, like a lot has changed really fast. And not in a way that I think, like when I interviewed Lorde, I was like, your first album is all about the suburbs and being bored in high school, and do you worry that you'll be less relatable if all you have to sing about is the glamorous life of a pop star?
Right.
Which I'm not making a comparison because I don't, like, for me, this is all on a much smaller scale. But she was basically like, as long as you're sincere, people will relate to that. They don't need to see themselves reflected in your experience. So where I'm at now is like, when I sit down to write an essay, sometimes it will work on Rookie, but sometimes it won't, because it's like, in my apartment in New York or whatever.
Right.
And, but I don't see that I actually see that as a blessing, because I think Rookie is meant to service its readers. And if you're kind of like, oh, these are the issues I'm dealing with, then you can miss out on what other people are dealing with. And so now I'm glad that it's no longer a place where I feel like I have to work out issues I have with growing up. I mean, I still do because I'm still growing up, but I think when you can stop being like possessive of something, it can become more useful for other people. Something like this.
Right. Now, a lot of the writers in Rookie, including yourself, are really putting themselves out there, are talking about painful and even kind of raw topics. Mm-hmm. And how do you, where do you draw the line on that kind of vulnerability? I mean, some of it seems so important to make something that's powerful that people want to listen to. But I think this for all kinds of online culture, that I wonder about the boundaries between putting yourself out there so people want to read it and putting yourself out there when everything is changeable and when you're really leaving yourself vulnerable for anyone to read about.
Right. I have a few kind of rules of thumb or thoughts on this. I mean, one is that I trust my gut. If something feels really wrong, then I don't feel like I owe anyone that information. Another is that I think there's a huge difference between like oversharing or being real just for the sake of just for shock value.
Right.
There's a difference between that and then an article where a writer will discuss her own sexual assault in the interest of helping the reader who might be going through something like that. Or who's writing about it like just for herself and someone could relate to it. I think that's great too. So I guess, I mean, as an editor, it just comes down to like each individual story and wanting to make something that is useful but doesn't have to be totally about the reader, but also isn't just like a diary entry.
What kind of, can you think of specific examples of that kind of writing that struck you when you were younger that made you be interested in that? Were there writers who?
So there's the book I Love Dick by Chris Kraus.
Yeah.
And I'm sure she's been called a narcissist and stuff like that for how much she's talking about her own feelings and everything, but throughout the whole book it feels like a means to an end of like a larger idea. And I do write about my own life and worry about navel gazing, but it's also just like, I think being a person is really interesting. I know my own brain the most, and I'm the most comfortable exploiting my own life. So I think reading her book when I was like 16 or 17, you know, some of it, I mean, it's called I Love Dick. It's like a little provocative, but it always felt like it was about something more than just someone telling her own story, which I actually don't have a problem with anyways, and I think is radical in its own way. But with Rookie, it is a little more geared towards helping a reader.
Right. Okay. Have you published stuff that you regret publishing?
Like my own work or in Rookie?
In Rookie.
Yes. I would feel bad talking about it because they're things other people wrote.
No. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you don't have to give us a list.
Here's the link.
But I was curious if there's stuff where you think, oh, that crossed some line somewhere, or if I don't know if there's anything you've taken down, or if there's
No, not taken down. But yeah, I mean, stuff where I maybe look back and I'm like, this is a little more adult. Not like adult themes, but like this isn't. It's a little too like life in New York in your 20s or something.
Right.
Yeah.
So you regret, I mean, more of the shallow stuff or more of the insular stuff than more of the raw stuff? That's interesting to me.
Yeah, well, with the raw stuff, like the other day I was looking back at stuff I wrote when I was younger, and like I was a little embarrassed by it, but I just realized like I think I was really just trying to be sincere, and I can't be mad about it. Like I get annoyed if I look back and see something where I wrote where I was really trying to give off a certain impression.
Right.
That's embarrassing to me, but if it was like in the interest of being honest and expressing a very real thought, then I don't regret it.
Okay. Yeah. I actually it always infuriates me when people trash their own adolescence and their own youth.
Yeah.
You know, and the older you get, you meet more people who say, "Oh, I can't," you know, like, "Oh, I like the stupidest song," or
Right.
you know, or "Boy, did I date someone terrible when I was 15," or something. And I just think, you were young, and that's how you felt, and it was fine.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
it's not.
It's all trial and error, and everyone is entitled to like making cheesy art or like writing bad poetry.
Thank goodness. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a load off my mind. A poet I really like says, it's true that all writing is narcissism, which means without narcissism there'd be nothing to read, which I always like.
That's a good
So
point.
you've done a tremendous amount, not to play off narcissism, but you've done a tremendous amount in what most people would consider to be a short period of time, and you're incredibly productive. Do you feel like that's we talked a little bit in a nearby green room about this, but do you feel addicted to productivity, or...
I feel exhausted. I don't know how much of it is about like productivity and wanting to like achieve something, and how much of it is just like mortality, like on my mind all the time. Like it's so. I think it's like I get frustrated with my own brain and how exhausting it is to be like, well, I want to rewatch 30 Rock, but I should watch this important old film that I've never seen instead.
Right.
And I think like. There's I feel weird talking about it because I am often considered a really good example of productivity. But I mean, when I look back on when I started Rookie, I was just like pulling all-nighters, and there was no way I wasn't going to do it, and it wasn't work, it was my like after-school project. It's what I really cared about. Now I have to do things like take care of my apartment and like feed myself, and I'm adjusting to a slower pace.
Right.
But I think the issue is when you think that you'll feel good once you check everything off, you actually feel good when you can kind of do one thing at a time and have other parts of your life.
Absolutely. So you're living in an apartment and feeding yourself. Good for you.
Thank you.
You're not going to college now. Mm-hmm. Which I know was a question that's on many people's minds, oddly. And I wondered if what do you tell me about that decision?
I always thought I was going to go. My dad is a teacher, and it was just so... I found something the other day, because I was just visiting home, so I was looking through all this stuff. I found something I wrote when I was 11, where I said that I wanted to go to NYU to study theater. And
it said you were in a play in New York.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I did apply my senior year and got in and deferred for a year because I was going to take a year off. And for right now, it's just like, there's no, if I were to go, I would be doing like, I would basically just be paying a school to give me credit for the work I'm already doing outside of school. Like the idea I had was like, oh, I'll do this one program where I can kind of keep doing my thing. But I'm just like, well, I should just keep doing my thing. And then when I actually want to focus on studies, I want to go when I can actually do that and I don't have other stuff going on.
Right. And how did your friends feel about that? Was that an alienating decision, or?
I mean, all of my friends kind of know what my situation is, and a lot of them aren't going to college. And I believe like 51% of Americans don't go. Don't quote me on that. But like most people.
Yeah, okay. It goes no further than this room and everyone listening to the radio broadcast.
My point is just that it doesn't, it felt like the norm in my family. My dad's an educator and my sisters went, but it's not the norm for everyone.
Sure.
And in the United States, it's like so. And if you went to the kind of high school that I did or something, then you think that's just the path, but in other parts of the world, it's not. And my friends are, no, none of them care. Because it's different for everyone.
No, of course, yeah. I just wondered if that was something that was conflicting in your life. Well, speaking of what other people think about you, in about 5 minutes, we're going to go to audience questions, and you will stand in line at some microphones that I don't see, but I've been told exist. Oh, there it is. And during that 5 minutes, at the suggestion of the Commonwealth Club, I've been asked to present you with a lightning round, which I wrote on the and Judah on the way here. Are you ready?
Yeah.
It's various lightning round questions, and if you if you choose the right answer enough, and they're opinion questions, so obviously there's a right and wrong answer. You'll be given a prize that you will be awarded anyway at the end of this evening. So that's a lot of pressure on you. You got these ready? You ready?
Thank you.
Do you need a sip of gin before? That was just to freak out your parents. All right, you ready?
Yeah.
Least favorite fruit?
Pineapple.
City where you had the best breakfast ever?
LA.
Movie everybody loves but you?
Donnie Darko.
I'm kind of with you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm not like anti-Donnie, I just don't care.
Yeah. I feel about that movie, a great Tears for Fears song does not a movie make. That's how I feel about that movie.
Whoa.
Thank you, yeah. I got some applause from my best friend from high school, that's nice. All right. Focus, don't digress. Something you overheard a stranger say once and never forgot.
In high school, I overheard two guys talking about Lollapalooza, and one was like, "Hey, alien, do you ever hear from Mucus? I only ever see him at Lolla." And it was like,
wow,
like cartoon skateboarders or something.
Yeah, that's good poetry. First question you have for God.
Why are you doing this?
Was that your answer? You're talking to me. Household chore that sucks so much.
Dishes.
Good celebrity to have as a servant.
Cyndi Lauper?
Wow. Okay.
She has the personality of she's like Mrs. White from Clue, but like spunky.
Oh, that's true, yeah. Like if you got home and you were like, it was terrible, she'd be like, oh, tell me about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hadn't thought that. I thought of her as like a driver or something. I wasn't driving. All right. Diner or pizza place?
Pizza place.
Drinking or smoking?
Being sober and everything.
Oh, of course. Sorry. Or a great juice bar. A scarf or a hat?
Scarf.
Weather too cold or too hot?
Too cold.
Peace or love?
Love.
The New Testament or Instagram?
Instagram.
Would it change if it was Old Testament?
That would be a different conversation.
Yeah,
yes.
I think so. Yeah. I know Passover is coming up, so we can talk about that later. All right. No one is lined up for questions because I have many more questions for Tavi. People are shy. I always feel this is like a memorial service where no one wants to be too eager to speak up. You know, to be like, no, I loved him, and I'm sorry he's dead. It's always the Q&A starts off. People don't want to be the first.
Hi.
Hello.
I have a question.
Okay.
Hi, Tavi. Do you think that it's easier in the internet age for girls to be who they are than pre-internet age?
It's very hard to say one way or another, but I think that people who see the internet as generally bad aren't like filtering it well enough. And I think that for girls, I, for the most part, see it as really positive. I think that selfies and creating a profile and like asserting your identity and creating yourself in your own image is really important, especially while there are like Reddit threads of like pictures guys took secretly of girls in public. And I also think that like before there was, you know, this, I'm being reductive to prove a point. If I had been growing up many years ago, there's like movies, TV, magazines, music. And now there are so many other outlets and mediums that like, I mean, just the communities I see on like Twitter and Tumblr of girls being really positive and building each other up, then you don't feel like you have to adhere to the standards of something totally ridiculous or inaccessible, because what you're looking at every day and the people you think are cool think that, you know, body positivity is cool and stuff like that. So for the most part, I think it's, I think if you use it in a way that's smart, it's really positive. The internet.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi.
Hi.
So feminism is something that's really obvious to me, the way that you put it as a set of beliefs and values that you have in your life. And you had a moment when you talked about your staff and your writers, and you mentioned that some of them maybe don't identify as feminists. And I've noticed that as somebody who communicates with other humans, there seem to be a lot of people who've been really alienated by the movement of feminism. How do you engage with those people?
Well, I think there are kind of two things at hand, because I know some people don't identify as feminists because they have been, they've believed the stereotype that I talked about earlier of like man-hating and hairy legs or whatever. But then I also think like the feminist movement historically has alienated a lot of different kinds of women, and so I don't fault any woman who doesn't identify as a feminist if she feels like, look, it's a history that hasn't really made an effort to include women who look like me or who have my background. But in terms of what, in terms of like the stigma and the stereotype, I mean, it's something I've always been trying to figure out. Like in school, I wasn't good at this because if someone in one of my classes said something ignorant, I would just be like dogmatic, and they'd be like, all right, thank you for confirming what I already thought. But I also think it's okay to get angry, and you have a right to that, and I guess it's just case by case, because then on Rookie, I'm not concerned so much with like slowly brainwashing girls into identifying as feminists, even though I think it's important to use the word whenever relevant to remove some of the stigma. But I am interested in brainwashing girls into like good self-esteem. And then if they feel like they connect with it, then that's great. But I wonder if, this is a tangent, sorry. I just wonder sometimes if when we talk about it and talk about the label, part of alienating people is because they feel some kind of obligation to use it. Like, I don't understand why actresses are asked, do you identify as a feminist? I first of all think it's weird that like someone who plays other people is asked about like their beliefs. And I'd say that as an actress. But I think that I'm not, with the work that I do, I would like to remove the stigma, but not at the cost of keeping a potential rookie reader from also finding an article that she could find really helpful. Thanks.
Hey there.
Hi.
So from your blog to Rookie, and now that you're active in theater, I've always been impressed because it seems like you have a very strong sense of self. and a strong vision for where you see yourself creatively. So I'm curious, like, do you have a vision of where you want to be 5-10 years from now, and if you're building a Tavi empire of sorts? You know, you've done a really great job of building this community, and I was just curious, where do you see itself going?
Thank you for your question. I haven't thought too broadly about the future. I kind of like the idea of finding time to do some form of college, whether it's actually going or just like taking a lot of time to take in the world instead of like having so much output. It's like what I said before, I think it's important to understand the context of like the art form you're working in and stuff like that. Oh. The phone didn't like my answer.
Yeah, you know, Siri should stay out of this.
No one asked her.
Yeah. That might be a woman the feminist movement never really has taken in. The robot woman.
Siri. Anyway, sorry, to answer your question, I don't know. I don't have any kind of plan. I'm trying to kind of be slow and thoughtful and use my judgment and not feel like I have to keep up the weird pace and trajectory that I feel I've somehow inherited from a past life or something.
Hello. I was wondering if while you were still in fashion, how you combined your own personal style with like the style of the fashion industry.
I guess I was never too interested in trends or magazines that were focused on trends because it was so fleeting. But if I just saw something I liked, and it happened to be like, you know, even the most kind of, for lack of a better word, mainstream designer or popular designer, I would still feel inspired by it. But I was also 12, so my version of it was like thrift store, dress-up box combination. But yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
It's a little weird because my question already got asked, so I've been struggling to come up with another one. It's kind of I'm curious about the Riot Girl reference, which I found very interesting because you and I have about a 10-year age gap between us, and so I found it. I was very surprised that you even like mentioned Riot Girl, and so I wondered like if that just like the female experience like kind of just cycles like through generations, and we think that it's very different and it's essentially the same. So I'm curious, one, like kind of how you discovered that. Maybe like what are like a few of the groups that you actually listen to? 'Cause I'm curious if they're exactly the same. And then also maybe if a piece of advice that like the present Tavi would give maybe like 14-year-old Tavi.
No, that's okay. With Riot Girl, I think it was probably through Sassy or through these blogs I was reading, and then it was just so easy to go back and find stuff the same way it had been with fashion. I guess what I related to was the idea that you could make art that was political, or that you could express political beliefs in a creative way. And I also just had a lot of appreciation for like, because I would go to school and be dogmatic and not know how to express myself, and so then it was really refreshing to listen to music that was just girls being angry. I mean, it's not just that. I say that with love. The bands, I mean, I was the most, like, I probably just listened to like the most popular Riot Girl ones, like Bikini Kill and Bratmobile, and if I were to give advice to 14-year-old me, I just like chill out and be nice to yourself. That's just like generally my blanket advice for anyone.
Hi. I'm just like wondering like how you deal with like all the self-doubt and stuff that goes into like the creative process and art and like comparing yourself to people, like stuff like that.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this so much lately. One thing I have found helpful is to remove responsibility in a way. Not as an excuse to be lazy, but as a way to feel like you can just go for it and try something and fail and you'll be fine and you'll keep editing or whatever. There's this museum in LA called the Museum of Jurassic Technology. And in Rookie Yearbook 2, I interviewed the guy who founded it. And it's based on the idea, it's based on like the very first museums where it wasn't divided between like natural history and art and science and stuff like that. It was just like a collection of cool stuff. And the guy who founded it and who runs it, when I interviewed him, said, he was like, why do we think of a bird's nest as natural history, but a work of art as something different? So to me, there's something comforting about the idea that, like, it's, like, one thing Chris Kraus, who wrote I Love Dick, has talked about is the idea of art as artifact. So just trying to make whatever's in you and be okay with it for what it is, and nothing has to be like better or worse, it's all just different. There's also a really good TED talk about this by Elizabeth Gilbert when she discussed having writer's block when she was trying to follow up the success of Eat, Pray, Love. And she goes into the history of the idea of the muse and how it's just, you know, sometimes you feel super inspired and sometimes you don't. And I think that's okay. And like when I think about the artists or writers I admire, it's not like they had a consistently upward slope in the quality of their work. It's like everything was kind of just its own thing. So I would say if you can take some of that pressure off of yourself, it's easier said than done, but that helps me a lot.
Thanks.
Hi. So mass media is very powerful. We've seen it in the past 10 years help to normalize being gay and smoking pot, among other things. And so considering the ideas that you espouse, can you map out the landscape of potential sort of mass media social infrastructure elements where this is sort of the landscape that you exist in with Rookie? Like, I'm talking about, what other elements could help to further these ideas?
Well, like I said, there used to be movies, TV, music, and magazines, and now there are also websites and blogs, and but I even think like the purpose of I even think websites and publications, like the fact is that Rookie could never be what like 17 was decades ago to the girls of America, because that kind of like Bible just doesn't need to exist anymore, because I do think lots of girls just find other girls with social media profiles who they identify with. So I don't quite know how to answer that, but I do think just the interactions that I see in kind of people lifting each other up in that way is extremely powerful. I hope that answers that. Thank you.
So I'm an avid reader of Rookie, and I think one of the things that like strikes me most about it is that it has such a distinct voice. Like, it's very personable and it's very relatable. So as someone, I guess, who went around developing that whole concept and idea and then executing it, what do you think goes into that process, or how do you identify and continue to keep that voice, throughout the years?
Thank you. I think I am just drawn to writers who write like they're talking. I think a lot of the topics that we deal with can be really scary for people, or people don't know how to talk about them, and I am just kind of very much on the lookout for anything that sounds too clinical or pamphlet-y, or like something that feels like a weird PSA you would have to watch in school. So I think I'm just drawn to writers who kind of have that in their voice already, and then have a sort of eagle eye on, as an editor, on anything that could feel maybe too condescending. Thanks.
Hi, Tavi.
Hi.
on Ricky, a lot of women that I look up to who are much older than I am, for example, Cindy Gallop was featured really early on in Rookie, and her interview left a lasting impression on me, but for the interviews that you've had and people who have been featured on the website, who stands out the most and has made the largest impact on you?
On me?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there have been so many and everyone's so great. I think the Lord one was just really special because it happened at a moment where she had gone in like 4 months from no one knowing who she was to like being on the cover of Rolling Stone. And I guess I felt I had strong feelings about the way she was usually written about, which was kind of as an anomaly or with this weird sort of, she was like a weird token goth girl in pop music, and people seemed, mostly like male older music writers, seemed like fascinated by her, and I just wanted to talk to her about, I knew that she read Rookie and had read my blog, so I kind of was lucky that I had this angle where we could kind of just talk about growing up at the same time and having the same references and being in a particular sort of position from a young age. And I was just really, I mean, she still is kind of like, she has a really intense persona, and she isn't super, I would hate to, I mean, she would say this herself. She has a song called that goes, "I am not a white-teeth teen." But I liked that how in this interview that was intended not for like Rolling Stone readers, but like girls like her, she really became really friendly and giving and just all of these things that I could understand might not have been easy to give off when you're being like looked upon as a spectacle.
Is there someone who you'd really like to interview? This is your opportunity to make your pitch.
Yeah, right. I mean, I've said this like a million times, but Beyonce would obviously be amazing.
I think the Commonwealth Club will be the tipping point for Beyonce.
I knew this would be my end. Yeah.
She hangs out here 24/7. It's crazy she's not here now.
Her and Jay-Z.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What about like a historical figure?
Frida Kahlo? I mean, if we're going into the deceased, I could go on and on.
Yeah.
Don't get me started on the dead.
Me too. Yeah. I love thinking about inviting dead people over, but actually the shock of them coming to life, and that you'd have, you'd be like, we need to focus on the interview.
Right.
Right, and they'd be like, but what are the lights coming from? It's magic. You'd be like, it's electricity, I can't get into it now. I have to ask you these questions. Yeah. He's so awkward. Anyway. Once we can raise the dead, the Commonwealth Club interviews are going to be amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, not that you weren't great.
Thanks.
So to close out the interview, as is the tradition here at the Commonwealth Club, I'm supposed to ask you your 60-second fix for the world, a way of improving the world.
Okay. So I'm someone who has made my career, livelihood, creative life through an online profile that is pretty inextricable from who I think of myself to be in real life. I've always felt like I was just kind of being myself and writing like I was talking. And I hate to be like wagging a cane at social media, but I have also found that I myself sometimes have trouble creating because you're thinking too much about what it'll look like later, or how a reader would respond. I used to think that in order for a really special event in my life to have happened, it has to be like documented, then shared, then read by people. And I think it's really important to feel like you can just document things for yourself or not at all and just live in the moment. And now, even though it's kind of my job, I just think of every time that I reach for my phone to check something mindlessly, I think of all of those checks adding up to a session of like the opposite of meditating. So like if the point of meditating, and I'm not an expert, but if it's about being present, I think that every time I do that and check my phone compulsively, it's taking me out of what's around me or making me feel like I'm constantly performing or something. So my idea that I try to do is just for my phone to not be my first and last interaction with the world every day. I think it's good to like wake up and do your stuff and get dressed and all of that, and then see what's going on, instead of feeling constantly kind of like you need to keep up or have an opinion or show how cool your life is because you have brioche toast. So yeah, that's my idea.
All right, here. And now, because you did so well on the lightning round, though even if you hadn't done well at all, you will receive a special prize from the Commonwealth Club.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. Not from me.
So we go through a really special process every year to pick somebody that not only this year we believe speaks to us and speaks to the community, but also is a young thinker who is shaping the world in front of us. So you now know that Tavi Gevinson started a blog at 11, that she's the editor-in-chief of Rookie magazine, that she's acted on Broadway. She's been described as both a cool kid and an outsider, by Lord as fearsome, by Emma Watson as a future editor of Vogue. She's been named to Forbes 30 Under 30 media list. She was named to Time's 25 most influential teens of 2014. Her accolades are numerous, but in a society where the hardest thing to do is to simply be who you are, what's most special about Tavi is that she fiercely lays claim to who she is and her right to change who she is, what she likes, how she feels, what she knows, whenever she wants. She then encourages others to do the same. Her bravery and innovation across industries as a thought leader is infectious, not just as a role model for teens, but for all of us. And I think that that's why you're all here and why people will be tuning in. So INFORUM's 21st Century Award this year, we can't think of anyone that embodies this more expertly than Tavi Gevinson. Her singular voice cuts through the noise, and we know she's just getting started. Tavi, for all that you've done and all that you'll do, please join me to accept INFORUM's 21st Century Visionary Award.
Just thank you for having me and giving this to me and saying all of that. Thank you for asking me questions. And thank you so much for coming, because it's so easy to stay at home and be comfy and stuff. But thank you.